Welcome to Results Driven Leadership. I've got Tony Penn and Danny Lands. I'm Vaughn Sigmon. We've got some great tips we want to share with you in today's video on meetings. We got the 3 best tips we could possibly offer you to make your meetings more effective. So where I'd like to start is with Danny. Danny, I know you're big on the agenda part of a meeting. Share some of the tips and to-dos when it comes to an agenda for a meeting.
Yeah, Vaughn, I think, the real critical thing is to have one first and foremost. So you want to have a plan when you go into a meeting. And I think one of the ways to look at it is you're trying to be respectful of everybody's time. If you look at time being money, now you're not only tying up your own time, but you're tying up several other people's time, which is a considerable amount of company resources. So you need to have a plan for how you're going to use that time effectively. And that agenda can be really concise. So each line item on the agenda should actually spell out how many minutes are going to be, offered for that particular topic. And it needs to be published in advance so that everybody knows exactly what's expected of them when they come to the meeting and they come well prepared. And that's an opportunity then to call them out if they don't come well prepared because you published the agenda in advance.
Yeah, so it's giving them that heads up. And how many days in advance or hours in advance should somebody get an agenda?
A lot of it depends on the frequency of the meeting. So if it's a one-off, I usually try to do it a week in advance and then maybe again a day or 2 in advance. If it's a weekly recurring meeting and the agenda is relatively stable, I'll still do it maybe a day or 2 in advance to remind people, oh yeah, I've got things I need to status in that meeting that I need to be prepared to speak to.
Very good, very good. And let me just share with everybody, if anybody would be interested in getting a great agenda tool, we offer that. Reach out to us, rdltraining.com. We'd be more happy. Just fill out an information sheet and we'll send that over to you. So, Tony, I know that you're really big on the time management aspect of an effective meeting, making a meeting effective. Talk about some of your tips on keeping it on time.
Well, I think a lot of it, thank you, Vaughn, a lot of it, has to do with what kind of commitment you have as a leader, and if you're committed to it, then you'll set specific expectations for how you expect that meeting to go. If there's any hint that you are not 100% supportive of the whole process of this important communication that you have as a group, then your team will know it, and it will have a ripple effect. The agenda, to Danny's point, is where it has to start, so people walking into that meeting know exactly what's going to be discussed and what they're responsible for. So it starts on time, it ends on time, and in the middle, it's relative to the specific content that you're providing. There's no distractions that normally occur when you're communicating, especially in this day and age. And then you just add the situation we're in now, which is when you're, having meetings remotely, there's a lot more opportunities for distractions. So there has to be a real clear expectation of what you want out of people from this meeting. Otherwise, people will drift off when it's not relevant maybe to them or whatever. So I think most important is your commitment and your support. And if you set clear expectations, people will fall in line and you'll get a lot accomplished.
Yeah, that's really important. And, one of the things, and we've all seen this, and anybody watching this video has certainly seen this, is you're having that guy, and I'll say it's that guy, it could be that girl, that tends to try to take over a meeting, and that becomes the distraction because they're driving you off into a ditch. You're getting off your agenda, getting off the main points, the main topics, what you're trying to accomplish. Do you have any suggestions on how they can wrangle this person in and make sure that this big distraction not only keeps this meeting on time, but future meetings on time?
Yeah, and part of that is creating the protocols for how to run a meeting. And part of those protocols are you have a time that you're allotted to provide the information that's relevant. If you're responding to somebody else's input, then it just becomes up to the moderator, the leader, which is generally you, to ensure that an individual like that is reeled in. That's one step. If there's some difficulty understanding what those protocols are, then I'm pulling somebody aside after the meeting or before the meeting or at some point and kind of reiterating what that is and why it's important. As opposed to calling somebody out in the middle of a meeting isn't really the way to do it, because that'll, humiliate them or whatever. So it makes much more sense to have the protocols, discuss them, everybody understands them, and when they're not followed, pulling somebody aside separately and reviewing them.
So having some ground rules, but if somebody's trying to take you off track during a meeting, and this is a little bit of a role play here, but you say, hey, listen, I know that's important. We probably all need to talk about it. Let's get it on a future agenda, but we only have an hour today. Let's get back onto the agenda we have and get these topics knocked out, and we'll get that. We'll parking lot that and get to it later. Is that kind of the way they need to professionally and respectfully keep things on time?
Yeah, that's a great suggestion. For me personally, when I ran meetings, there was never any doubt as to exactly how they were going to go. Because when it did get sidetracked, I very respectfully put it back on track immediately. So it's just like any other type of human behavior and learning, is when there's repetition and consistency, people tend to respond to that and they learn what the expectations are. If you're doing it one day, you're letting everybody, have a free-for-all, and the next week you're like, come on, man, let's pull it together. That generally doesn't work as well as you being very consistent on what those rules and protocols are. And so when someone starts going off on a tangent and you reel them back in, that's standard. And my experience has been is that there's a lot less tangents when they understand what the expectations are.
Yeah. And I guess the other thing too is making sure just the right people are there. And, only people who are pertinent to these topics, to this agenda, are in this meeting, that we're not wasting other people's time. If we're on the subject of time, that it's important for them to be there, and it's only the people that need to be participating on these topics, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
100%.
So if you really want to be respected and admired for your meetings, have an agenda, make sure it's out there 24 hours, at least 24 hours in advance. Make sure you're keeping it on time, you're keeping it on topic during the course of the meeting. And then what I would suggest, in addition to those two very valuable tips, is make sure that the meeting ends with actionable to-dos. Who's going to do what by when? So many meetings frustrate people because it's just a great conversation. And meetings, sometimes we need a nice conversation over lunch or over happy hour. But meetings should be very action-oriented. So at the end of the meeting, it needs to be on your agenda. Okay, what are our takeaways? Who's going to do what by when? Kind of the SMART goal approach. What specifically are going to get accomplished? Who's going to take care of it? And what's the time-bound aspect of it? When are they going to get this done? We hear hundreds of managers complain to us as we're going through training. They never complain about themselves, of course. They complain about the other people who are holding meetings they're having to come to. But it's the single biggest complaint is we never get anything accomplished from these meetings. We're just talking and kicking the can down the road. So if you really want to be admired and respected for the meetings that you facilitate, the meetings that you're responsible for, have an agenda, keep the structure there, start and end on time, respect everybody else's time because everybody else has got a job to do. And then the third one is make sure there's an actionable takeaway for either the group or individuals within that group, and make sure that's on your agenda for the next go around, that we get a follow-up as to what has transpired since the previous meeting. And, there's a tactical meeting, there's a strategic meeting, there's an update meeting. And so there's going to be takeaways to all of those, commitments and takeaways to all of those. I really appreciate you two guys joining us for this video today. Danny, Tony, I love you guys to death. Hopefully you guys got some great information out of today's topic matter. We'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks, Ron.